Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun and it's all-around good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast. We are your source for the latest breaking Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion each and every week. And this week on the show, we are going to be talking about the 4th episode of the Acolyte Day, as well as answering your burning Ask the SWU questions. All that and much more on the show. My name is Chris, and joining me is my good friend, Mr. Dominic Jones.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Ben. Hello, Hannah. Hello, everybody. Yeah, very, very excited to talk about this episode. There's stuff to discuss in it that maybe will be of a different tone, at least from me, than previous weeks. But I do just want to say, there's been a lot of talk I've seen in Star Wars fandom. People are all about the Yord Horde. There's these stickers that keep flying around, and I think that's pretty cool. I can't get it with the light. That's terrible. There it is. Anyway, that's pretty cool. That's pretty great. But I think after this week, I want to start the follow-up to the Yord Horde, a supplemental group, not one that's in competition. We don't need to be in competition with each other. This can be two groups working together, and that's Basil's buddies. I want to start Basil's buddies because for whatever else I may say about this episode, Basil is a precious, perfect creature who I will protect with my life. If you have a problem with Basil, you have a problem with me, and I will fight you. In theory, in a nice sort of lightsabery kind of fun way at a celebration. But Basil, great character, absolutely adorable. Best part of the episode, best part of the Acolyte. The rest of the episode, we'll talk about it. It's going to be a good show.
So apparently there were some people leaving some reviews saying that it was the best episode ever, but Basil ruined it, I guess. People are wrong. So that sounds like it's a response to, which is shocking to me that people would say that. But I guess someone did. You know who you are. Dominic knows who you are.
No, I don't have anyone that I don't actually have anyone that I'm beefing with about this. I just can't make an intro that's non-confrontational. I just have to have an enemy, and so I'm imagining one right now. I'm imagining that theoretically there's someone out there, who hates Basil.
Attack me with all your strength.
Exactly. Strike me down with all your hatred.
Wow,
and
about it now.
More powerful than you can possibly imagine. I don't know. Join Basil's buddies. We're a fun group.
I'm going to be Basil them with my skills.
No, that didn't work.
Jeez.
Nope.
Oh, pulling it. He's stretching. Oh, jeez.
It's only one letter different. Also joining us is Hart, the Star Wars guy.
Yeah, so I'm having trouble keeping up with all of these little clubs that we've started. We've got Basil's buddies now. We've got Soul Patrol, apparently. We've got the Yord Horde. Someone's gonna have to. It's what is this? Jecky something or another. Ash is gonna have to remind me who the Jecky clan
that's the
is.
Group that Chris isn't allowed in.
Yeah,
banned. Whatever their name is, you're banned.
And I've made Kel's Angels, which is for Kilmaka.
I like that one.
Yes, that's what I'm going for.
Yeah. So is somebody writing these down, because these are all great.
Yeah.
And I want to be a member of all of them.
Jecky Jam is what you were looking for.
Jecky Jam. Oh, that's sick. I like that. I like that.
There we go. Lots of clubs, lots of acolyte clubs, and all not like beefing with each other though. All like moving, dancing to the same rhythm. You know. I don't know.
That's great. And finally, also joining us all the way from the Hannah side, it's Ray.
Hey, g'day there. Great to be back for another week. Another week of just what the hell's going on. But yeah, I can't wait to talk about it, get into it, and discuss it as always, and try and find the light in all of this happening. Yeah, can't wait to get into it all.
Before we get into like the discussion proper, and before we do the plugs and everything, I do have a question about this episode that I cannot figure out, and
Okay.
I want to know, why is this episode called Day? Can anyone explain that to me?
Yeah.
Because
I you know what?
Okay.
I thought about it, and in about a half a second, I realized something. It takes place during the day.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
Dang it. Well, the episode. What are you talking about?
Well, I think I thought I had. Well, actually, I didn't personally have. I saw Molly from Star Wars Explained say this, that what's the bet that next episode is going to be called Night, and perhaps it's a play on some sort of perspective of a situation, which I think is a pretty good speculation. So maybe it'll make sense with next week, but yeah, why specifically Day? Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Great
I mean,
question.
they specifically
it's a bit
reference
odd.
it in the episode. They talk about we only have this much daylight left.
Do they?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
May says.
I
May
just
says
watched
we
the
only have
episode
3 hours of
an hour
daylight.
ago,
Let's
but-
go.
So
That's how I
how
knew
we're
it took
naming
place during the
episodes
day.
now.
You know, it was by the dialogue that I knew about that. I didn't look at the set. You know, you never know. Alien
Mhm.
planets, you know, if it's day or night. Bioluminescent
Yeah.
atmosphere, you know.
All right. Well, I'm glad we've settled that. So let's plug some things, and then we'll talk about the rest of the episode.
All right. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you punch that subscribe button. Chewy, you can super chat with us if you're watching live. You can also support us not live by becoming a channel member. Please subscribe to us if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or any other podcast services. You can check out our Discord. The link to join the SWU Network Discord is in the description of wherever you're finding this stream, podcast, video. And we got lots of great stuff over there. We got game nights, we got watch parties. We're going through the entire saga in chronological order, more than the saga, like all the Star Wars stuff that's on screen in chronological order, which is incredible. So it's really, really, really fun. The only social media account that you're allowed to follow us on is Threads at the SWU. Everything else is illegal. And as always, check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network. We have the Raeside, we have Iron Cannon, we have Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and much, much more.
All right. Let's get into this. We're talking about the Acolyte Season 1, Episode 4, Day. Yes, that's the title, Day. Written by
Perfect.
Claire Keuchel and Cor Adana, and directed by Alex Garcia Lopez. Let's go around the table. Let's give some initial impressions. Ben, you know the drill. Start us off. We're going to throw it to you first. What did you think of Day? By which I mean the episode, not just how was your day. I don't care.
My day was fine, thank you. And also my thoughts on Day are, I liked it. I'm not sure if I love it quite yet. It is a lot of just like people walking around and trying to get someplace, and not a lot super happening in this episode. Even though, like, I mean, the best part of the episode is the last 5 minutes. Like, that's the juicy part. That, like, when it actually, the episode like gets really good, the screen goes black and it pisses you off. It's like, just keep going. I want to see where this happens. So it's a very, seeing this episode for the first time and realizing where it ends is a very frustrating experience. But like, I did like the episode. I do have some questions about some things. I'm very like, okay, why did that person do that? And some other stuff. And, you know, it's interesting. I am also just questioning a whole lot of, like, we're asking a lot of questions. We're not yet doing a lot of answering yet. And I am just concerned for the show abroad of just like, okay, what are we doing here? I hope next week is the beginning to like let's start revealing some things. I'm not saying everybody has to take their mask off. I'm not saying, you have to tell us everything, but a few different answers would help. And so I'm very curious of that. I'm not giving up on the Acolyte. I'm not becoming a hater. I'm just saying I have some concerns.
Have some concerns. Okay, but you like the episode overall. Hannah, let's go to you next. What did you think of season 1, episode 4?
Yeah, this episode really went in a direction for me that I really, really enjoyed. I found the storytelling points, the kind of the plot points that we were focusing on, I really engaged with. All the Jedi stuff at the temple, the conversation Osha and Jord have, I really loved, and I think there was some really good character moments between a lot of people. And of course, the ending of the episode I thought was fantastic. I didn't quite see exactly that like happening and the way it happened, so I really, really loved that. But I think I have a few. I'm not settling fully with the pacing of the show overall, and it's still again in this episode. I'm not settling with where we're cutting and where we're flowing onto scenes, but it's. I think that's more of a preference thing. But yeah, I'm still not settling well with that. But overall, as a story, I'm still very engaged, and if anything, this episode has me the most engaged I have been with this show. So very good.
All right. Very engaged, Hannah. Chris, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'll start by saying, since I wasn't here last week was a 10 out of 10 for me as well.
Agreed.
I really loved the episode last week. So going in, show continuing to get better and better for me. This is definitely the first episode where I did feel a bit of a slowdown and the pace and potentially the quality of the show, which is expected. You're not going to have every episode be better than the previous one. That would be kind of rare for that to happen. So it was definitely an enjoyable episode. There were definitely some interesting things in it. A cameo by a favorite Jedi Council member was pretty cool. And then the ending of the episode in that cliffhanger was pretty fascinating. And it definitely, makes us as ready as ever to, like Hannah said, be engaged and be ready to watch be really, really excited and anticipating the next episode. But I think, there was a lot of walking. There was a lot of talking about not too much interesting things. And I feel like whatever happens in the next episode should have been combined with this episode to be like a 45-minute long episode instead of this one being like a 35-minute episode and then that being whatever it's going to be. Like, I think the pacing just wasn't quite in there. This episode also needed slightly more Jackie. So I'm saying that because there's someone over there holding a blaster at me.
yeah, Chris. Chris is definitely not being threatened. With this thing. Definitely not. There's no listener just standing off screen.
But yeah, so for me, it's just like coming off of amazing episodes, it feels like a little bit of a letdown, but it's still really entertaining, really enjoyable, and lots of cool moments in the episode.
Okay. Lots of cool moments, enjoyable, but maybe a little speed wobble for Chris.
Yeah.
Okay. For me, I want to reiterate what I've said in the previous weeks before I say anything about this episode.
Oh my God, it's coming.
Which is, I think the first 2 episodes were a real strong premiere. I thought they were really interesting, really exciting, got us settled into this time period and into this story in a really exciting way and built up a lot of momentum. Last week, I gave it a 10 out of 10. I thought it was about as perfect an episode of Star Wars as you can do. It was weird. It was different. It was off kilter. I loved it. I'm not an Acolyte hater. The thing that people keep saying is that the writing has been poor. I disagree with that. I disagreed with that through the first 3 episodes. I thought the writing was pretty strong. It was subtle in places. It hit you over the head in other places, but it was doing that to make a point. This episode felt like a Jon Favreau script, and I don't mean that in a good way.
Ooh. Yeah. Ooh.
It wasn't as bad as the bird hunt episode of Mandalorian season 3.
Come on.
Which is
them's
to
fighting
date
words.
the worst episode of live action Star Wars television is for my money. But it had a lot of similarities. And you know, I felt like something just fell down in Hannah's backdrop. I felt like I felt like all of the characters just said what they were thinking with no subtlety, no nuance, no nothing. It was just like it was a first draft where you just have the characters say what they're thinking instead of writing them like real characters. So I found it what could have been a really interesting and sort of thoughtful, moving episode wound up just being really clunky, really perfunctory, and as a result was extremely mediocre. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. It exists in that gray space in between. There's some really great things that happen in it. I love the twist at the end with Kilnaka. I thought that was really good. I really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, Basil is the most perfect character that has been put to screen since BB-8. I am getting rid of all of my Grogu merchandise to make room for more Basil merchandise.
Wait a minute.
That is inevitably coming, right? And I came away from this one going like, boy, it didn't kill the momentum, but the Acolyte train is moving a lot slower than it was coming out of episodes 1, 2, and 3. So not great, not terrible, just kind of there is how I would describe it. Just kind of there. So with that in mind, let's just start with a good place. And we're just going to go around the table. Everybody's going to say their favorite thing about Basil. Hannah, start us off.
Oh, God. What a scream. What a scream on this little guy.
Yes.
My word, he can make a sound,
Yes.
can I? Yeah, no, of course. I think this just another lovable creature in Star Wars. You can't beat it. Cannot beat it. My biggest actually point with bringing up Basil is he CGI or is he real? Because I actually had a bit of trouble this episode differentiating it. There is scenes where when he's walking through the forest and like on the hills and everything, that I'm like, oh, this is a performance actor. This is someone in a suit, definitely holding this character up and being this character. But then the close-ups of his face seemed a bit more CGI and touched up, which I think that might just be the balance. Maybe the longer shots it was someone, maybe the closer ones were CGI. But what do you guys think? Is this real or is it a both?
I agree. Based on just looking at the stills now, I look at the still from further away, and I'm like, well, that very clearly looks like a person.
Yes, that looks
with a mask on.
Real, yeah.
Maybe a little bit of touching up, but it really does look like a mask and animatronic at that point. And then that close up photo, it looks computer generated. That looks too realistic to be a mask.
It looks too realistic to be real.
It looks too realistic to be a material fake of the real. So combination. I would agree with you if I had to guess.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because actually I failed to read this, but I did see that they released an interview. I think it was talking with Neil Scanlon and the Creature Effects guys about Basil, and they were kind of patting themselves on the back because they were, I think there is a lot of real practical effects that are going into Basil, and maybe some CGI touch-ups. That's my takeaway. But they were, they actually I think it was Monday, they actually revealed Basil to the world. We had seen him, little clips of him, but nothing major. But then we got things, and I just so yeah, it's interesting. I'd actually love to have more info about how they actually made this character. But I just love the concept of just when they announced him, I'm like, okay, so he's like a local guy. Like they're gonna show up on this planet and they're gonna like have to hire some dude, this Basil dude, to go find Kelnaka. And then you get on the ship and he's already there. And I love Osha's like, is he with us? What's the deal with this guy? And I love the idea of like just other people in the Jedi Order that just work that aren't Jedi. They're just like this sentient being that's also basically a bloodhound that takes a scent and then goes and looks and just takes off, sometimes without his party and just goes to find the person they're looking for. I just love that concept. I love this new look of the Jedi is so fascinating. I love, yes, of course, Basil is the best.
Yeah. On the CGI practical debate, it wouldn't surprise me if they had a real Basil that was there on set, like that was made to look like it was like a puppet, a taxidermy sort of thing that they used to get lighting references and that sort of thing. But then most of Basil is CGI. Perhaps there was somebody there on set to kind of give a motion capture performance to give it give him some more reality. I will say part of the reason that this character resonated with me so much is that growing up, my aunt had a dog who was named Basil.
Oh,
and
wow.
He was a corgi. And so, he's real low to the ground, just like Basil is, and had that kind of had a similar kind of goofy energy to Basil. And like Basil, the character reminded me of Basil, the dog. Awesome. And so it took me back to that sort of like childhood place in a way that, that's why I think that's why Basil is my favorite character in this, and why I can't truly hate this episode because that would be hating my buddy from my dog cousin.
Dog cousin, I love that. Well, we have to for sure see Basil come up in Galaxy's Edge in next year. Surely that has to be the next step for him because yes, I think a very lovely character.
Okay, not to jump too far ahead here, but we have to address the evidence in the room. Okay, everyone is wondering, who is the person in the mask? And I really don't want to ruin this for you, Dom, but look, Basil was there, and then Basil wasn't there, and then the Sith Lord showed up. I don't want to say anything here. I don't want to say anything
obvious.
here.
Oh my God.
It's obvious.
It's very, very sus of Basil. Okay, Basil needs to be watching his back. Okay, that guy he's something shifty about him.
Look, Ben. I have been a true Jedi and a rebel all through my life. But if Basil is the Sith Lord, I will follow him wherever he wants to go.
Oh my God.
Oh, the threats are being made.
I will follow that little
Basil Buddies
guy.
was just a cover for a cult, apparently.
Yeah, basically. All right. Let's talk about Mae. Not Mae, Osha. The two twins. We'll start with Osha because I think this is the character. This is where the episode started to go off the rails for me, and I'm curious to hear your guys' perspective because obviously it didn't feel that way for you. Right from the start, Osha says to Jackie, "I'm out. I'm done. Thanks for proving that my sister is alive, but I am no longer interested in this. I no longer am part of this. I'm going to go back to my life as a scrapper or whatever it is that she is." And look, I get that part of the hero's journey is the rejection of the call, and that has to happen at some point in the story. So I get that that's what's happening here. But this felt like it came out of nowhere for me. She felt real invested in the last two episodes that we saw her in the present timeline. And this just sort of felt like an unnecessary bit of drama at the start of the episode. Hannah, you look like you have a point.
Yes,
to make here.
I have a lot to say about this, but
Okay.
are you finished your setup of it? Yeah.
Take it away.
I have a lot of thoughts about this because I actually agree. Even though my initial kind of overview, I like the direction of this episode. This is actually one of my problems because I wonder if it's because, and it is interesting that you loved last episode so much. I wonder if that feeling was maybe because of the big flashback episode that happened. And I've been thinking, oh, maybe that flashback we saw, episode 3, should have happened elsewhere in the season. Because for me personally, in this scene, I totally agree. I was like, I when she started talking about it, and I felt like it was meant to be an emotional moment or a big decision that she was making that she wasn't going to be a part of it. I had to be like, where was she in the fold again? Like, had they asked her? Was she a part of the mission? Like, I couldn't remember the gravity of her being a part of this. Like, obviously, like, it's to get her sister, it's to get Mae, but I couldn't relate to the emotion that was being presented of, I'm not gonna do it after all, and she leaves. I didn't connect with that emotion that they were presenting there. So I agree where this felt not random, but it didn't feel backed enough for me as an emotional decision. And that, I think personally, it's because I kind of forgot between last episode to episode 2 where that timeline was for her. But because it felt really dramatic. It felt like it should have been more dramatic. But it was like I was watching it be dramatic, but I was like, is it dramatic? Like, is this a big deal?
And it didn't help.
I agree.
It didn't help that the dialogue was like clunky as can be in this scene. It was just like, it felt like people trying to write Star Wars dialogue in the sense that they're trying to make it sound like, what would a Jedi say in this situation? When great Star Wars dialogue, in my mind, is not that. It's, Han Solo. It's, the banter between Anakin and Obi-Wan. It's that sort of thing. I think they were starting to build up a bit of a back and forth and a bit of a dynamic between Osha and Jackie Lecky. But this scene should have felt a little bit more like two friends talking rather than two like business professionals who had just gotten a new thesaurus as a Christmas gift and we're trying out a couple of new words on each other.
There was a lot in this dialogue that I related to the Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order. There was very much, I that really struck me. I mean, I have analyzed the Ahsoka leaving arc and her experience of that to the deepest depths and levels. So the second this was presented and that like this dialogue was happening, I was like, I feel like they're trying to go in that direction. And Lizzie Headland was on record for saying that, what episode is it specifically? But it's the final, it's the I think it was the final, the second last episode of that Ahsoka leaving arc that she really loved and she was keeping in mind for this show. So I was like, is this the part where she was like, oh, I like that Ahsoka episode because Osha, sorry. Oh, gee, I know,
right?
Names right.
We were told for so many months the main character's name was Mae.
I was like, it's Mae.
Only to find out it's
God.
Osha.
Yeah.
So good.
And played by the same actress.
But I feel I feel the energy of that sentiment of, I'm denying the Jedi because I need to find my own identity and find my own way. Very valid storyline, very interesting story point. But again, for me, I just don't think there was enough build up. Like, I mean, this is intense to compare it to Clone Wars because obviously Clone Wars, you have seasons of a relationship we have with Ahsoka to feel that gravity of her saying that. But Osha's almost saying the exact same thing in this scene, but it didn't feel gravity because it's like we've only seen her on screen for almost an hour. We've only connected with this character for only an hour between the 3 episodes she's had so far. So it just, again, that gravity of the situation did not hit for me. I was like, oh, this is dramatic, but it's not there. Gee, I have a lot to say. Someone else now.
Yeah, I think, well, okay, so for me, for one, I barely remember this scene. And that speaks both something supportive and then also towards something that is a kind of a counter to what y'all are saying. That the thing that supports it is, well, maybe it was so clunky and badly done that I don't even remember it. That supports that. But at the same time, the kind of concept that y'all are throwing out there of it should have been more emotional. I don't I don't know if that fits with my brain. I don't know if I was expecting it to be that way, and measuring this against something that it wasn't. Because for me, at least the way that I understand the story, that moment already happened in the past. She's left the Jedi Order before. And so that took a moment. It already happened. We've yet to see that. We might see it in a flashback, or we may never see it. At this point, the reason why she's a part of this mission is because she's on the hook for doing something that she didn't do. That's her motivation. Now that they've discovered that it wasn't her, and now that she's discovered that her sister's still around, but her sister has gone to a place where she effectively is gone, the person that she knew, there's really nothing for her character to do anymore at this situation. She's just going to go back to the default of who she was before, making her way in the galaxy by herself. But that's not a new decision. That's a decision that's already been made. So she's just reiterating something that has already happened, that's already been communicated, that everybody already knows. And so as a result, there's no emotion behind it. It's just, we're just passing through it quickly as a plot moment, essentially.
So then I guess my point would be, if you're not going to make it into a moment worth having, don't do it. Like that's my feeling is that it feels like it.
You have to explain why she's still there. You have to explain what is the motivation at all. And Jackie's the one who's giving her the motivation for that. So, she's trying to coax her to stay by feeding her those breadcrumbs of, oh, I saw her face when she saw you, there's something for a second there, and so you had to give a reason for Osha to still be with them, and it was done through this dialogue, and I felt effectively that was done.
So the other sort of part of it though is that there's another scene like less than 5 minutes later where Soul actually gets her to stay. And,
oh yeah, that's right. I'm confusing the two. Am I?
Yeah, and so maybe not. Like I do think you're right, and that's what Jackie is supposed to be doing in that scene, is sort of trying to, suggest that Osha should stick around, but it's Saul who actually gets through to her. And there is a moment in the Saul scene where she says, he's like, I want you to stay. And she says, like, back in the order, like she's interested in that. Like she's that's intriguing to her. And I think there's some drama in that moment when he says, well, not really, just as like a citizen advisor, whatever she is, she gets the weird white robes, like whatever that is. That's where I think there is some drama. This scene with Jackie just feels like it's almost like we're trying to catch the audience up because we know we've been away for a week because we had this flashback. And so we need to just remind people of where we were, and kind of, I don't know, it makes the characters feel like they're backsliding in a way that isn't interesting. If Osha if we skip this Jackie scene, much as I hate to skip a Jackie scene, but if we skip that scene and we just have Osha leaving, talking to Pip, being like, let's go, we've done our part, let's get out of here, and Soul stops her. To me, that keeps the momentum going, because there's new revelations within that scene. Because up until this moment, we haven't really felt like, does Osha want back into the Jedi Order? Is that something she might be interested in? And then we see that for just a glimmer of a moment. That to me is really interesting. Whereas the other scene, again, it feels perfunctory. It feels like it's just sort of there.
Yeah.
And
you know
what it feels like? Filler. Because they needed to pad the runtime.
Pulling out not pulling any punches.
I hate myself for saying it. Understand, nobody hates me more than me for saying that. But it felt like it was just kind of there.
The only thing that it illustrates is that a Soul has an ability and a connection with Osha that others don't. That's the only contrast that I feel like is worthwhile to be made in this situation, because you're basically showing one Jedi fail at doing something and another Jedi succeed at doing something. So that contrast, it makes you appreciate Soul a little bit more than if you just saw, oh, he just tried and he succeeded right away. You didn't see that he had to actually do something that had not been successfully done prior. So that's the only thing. It adds to his character a little bit. But that's what the one piece I see that's added. But again, you have to process it for a lot to even get to that point to think about that.
And Jackie's a Padawan, Soul's a knight. Like, he should be able to do more. Yeah. Just because he's got more experience. He's a grown up. She's a kid. All that stuff. And again, I think you take that scene out. Everything that at least a couple of scenes that come later feel smoother, more interesting, including that one, and also. The scene where Yord is giving the speech of let's do this, and Osha meets Basil for the first time and is confused by him, unsure of what he is, starts asking Jackie about it, and Jackie, and they wind up interrupting Yord, and Yord sort of calls him. He's like, do you have something to share, citizen? And she replies, no, great briefing, Yord. And she calls him Yord the same way that Jackie calls him Yord. And you start to see a little bit of a bond building there. You see that's building off of the two previous episodes. So you feel like there's a little bit of a friendship there, that she's seeing Yord. They see Yord the same way. They kind of have a similar view on what's going on. They could be buds. Whereas this scene is so stilted and borderline awkward in its dialogue. And
is it supposed to be though? I always ask that when there's awkward dialogue. I always ask, are they trying to make it awkward on purpose? Is that what they're trying to get across?
So Yord in episode 1 and 2, 100% awkward on purpose, and brilliantly so.
Yeah,
brilliant. That's why there's a Yord horde, because it's so weird and awkward and delightful and funny. That's that's good. I don't think the relationship between Osha and Jackie Lecky is supposed to be that. I think it's supposed to be a budding friendship that we see later on in the episode, and a friendship where they can give each other advice, as again we see later in the episode. Again, there's good in this episode. I don't want to be full hater, but there's some scenes that just don't fit for me. And
did anyone else get? Sorry to interrupt you, Dom.
No, go ahead. I interrupt all the time.
Did anyone get Mace Windu vibes when he calls Osha citizen?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And I went back to I was gonna clip it, but then I realized Mace actually calls Ahsoka civilian, or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around. I was thinking he doesn't call it quite the same word. It's civilian. Because I think she makes reference to, I'm not going to wear those civilian robes. I think it's some kind of civilian robes that they wear. Maybe
Mace's
when
line is
with Jedi.
Yeah, and then so that was Lords, and then
the implication is the same, and obviously I think it's supposed to be a reference
same
because
energy.
Leslie Headland.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The Clone Wars love. Let's talk about the scene of, let's call it the Jedi Low Council, seeing as they don't want to go to the Jedi High Council.
Let's go there.
Vernestra's kind of holding court. Sol is there. Ki-Adi-Mundi is there, looking very young with a brown hair and a brown beard. There's some other Jedi there. They're all sort of debating what to do about Mae and what she's up to. Ben, let's go to you. Well, what did you think of the Jedi Low Council and what we learned in this scene?
I mean, they're definitely, I see what's going on here. I see what Leslie Headland and the writers are trying to do here, because unfortunately there's a lot of people on the internet right now that are like, oh my gosh, how could this be? They're dealing with the Sith, and Ki-Adi-Mundi's there, and he's the guy in Phantom Menace who says, oh, the Sith have been extinct for millennia, and he's confirming this. And it's just no, they're trying to tell you that Ki-Adi-Mundi is a big idiot, okay? He's a big dumb idiot.
Clearly.
This is what the point of this scene is. And the point of this thing is he's there. He's on the cusp, and he's right there. And no, it doesn't defy any logic. It doesn't break any canon, because none of these characters know that they're dealing with a Sith Lord, okay? None of them do. They're all in the dark, including Ki-Adi-Mundi. But he is part of this Low Council that is not only ignorant to stuff that perhaps they should be looking into more and should be more apprised of, they're covering it up. They're covering up. So not only is there information they could receive, they are standing in the whims to cover this up and make sure the Jedi Council never hears about it. And so that's what's going on here. Like if you ask the question, which is a totally reasonable question to ask, is like, oh, there's going to be Sith and Jedi interacting, yet we know for at least 100 more years that the Sith are not found out about. The Jedi don't know what's happening. Here's your answer. It's cover-ups. It's a lot of Jedi are probably going to die, a lot more than already have been. I'm sorry, most of those Jedi on Koba, they're not going to make it. I'm sorry. There's a lot of Jedi about to die, may have already died in that one last little scene. But I do love the inclusion of Ki-Adi-Mundi is absolutely intentional. I love it. I love that he's there. I love that they were just like, yeah, okay. He's a long-lived character, as we've seen with other characters. Of course he'd be there. A little bit younger. And yeah, I think that this is things that it's unfortunate because like I like Ki-Adi genuinely. I also like Vernestra, but they are all representative of the hubris of the Jedi, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's there's a reason Ki-Adi-Mundi doesn't go on the mission. He's not actually going to experience this. And people have an amazing ability to deny the obvious, to deny what is clear, to deny what should be reality, because it's more comfortable to think about things a different way, or they have a reason to think about it in a different way. And I think what we're beginning to be implied with some of what Vernestra is saying is they might have a reason to keep things the way they are. And when Ki-Adi-Mundi winds up on that high council, he might be more interested in protecting the status quo than in actually doing good.
I think he's just preoccupied with the droid attack on Wookiees. That's all he cares about.
Yeah.
Who knows? We could real quick. I just want to say, who knows if we get to Phantom Menace after this series done, we could be reading that line as Ki-Adi-Mundi going like, "Oh, the Sith have been extinct for millennia. No, none of us knew about the Sith returning. No.
Oh my goodness.
Hannah, Ki-Adi-Mundi is like your favorite character in all of Star Wars. What did you think of this scene?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I feel like I have a right to Ki-Adi-Mundi now. I have been on his butt about who he is as a person for a long time. And so, I mean, just before I get into like what I think of this and what it all means, it's just kind of hilarious. It's like I've been doing this bit about Ki-Adi-Mundi for so long, all these memes of like me dressed up as him for Halloween last year, and then now he's like on the lips of every single Star Wars fan right now, and everyone's going nuts over him. And I'm like, I've been going nuts over this guy for months. You're all just catching up. So very funny, but I mean, the question being like, should he have been in there? I mean, I find the whole birthday thing so funny, so funny. Like honestly, because you can be like, oh, but he was a different age. Like, sure, yeah, he did have a different age. Anakin didn't have a Padawan. You know what I mean? Like Luke and Leia weren't brother and sister. Like that's like almost the DNA of Star Wars too. It's this ever evolving thing, and it was in EU. We've been. Freaking Dave Filoni changed a myriad of things about the lore of Mandalore when they came into the Clone Wars. And, things change and form over time. So honestly, like, did he have an age before? Sure, he did. Yeah, but that is not a concern of mine.
Am I mistaken?
Just to give some context for people who are maybe don't know what
am I going too fast there? Yeah.
Is that apparently in Legends, Ki-Adi-Mundi was like born like 80 years before the Phantom Menace, and here we are 100 years before, and he's an adult. And apparently this is upsetting to some people for some reason.
Well,
So
okay, hold on a second. When you're talking about the expanded universe and the former canon of Ki-Adi-Mundi, wasn't he married? Wasn't he the only Jedi who was married?
yeah, and didn't he have like multiple wives?
He had 7 wives, not
Yeah.
9.
Yeah, he was
wives.
like that was because that was like part of his
So-
culture and stuff.
I think that entire story is all kind of not lining up with the rest of Star Wars, not just the age.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's the legend. Love Legends. There's tremendous, wonderful storytelling in Legends, and a lot of current, present, contemporary Star Wars is bringing over ideas, concepts, characters, sometimes entire storylines from Legends, and they're bringing it over into the new canon. We see basically that's what the Ahsoka show was from start to finish. But that does not mean that what happened in Legends has to line up with what happened in canon. These are new stories. These are separate stories. They are different stories. Not saying one is better or worse than the other, but they're two separate things. So Ki-Adi-Mundi has two different backstories. You can like whichever one you like. That's not the question here. But as far as the current storytelling is concerned, dude's 200 years old in the Phantom Menace,
It's literally like meaningless to that story to say like, oh, he's like 70 something years old in the Phantom Menace. Like, like that doesn't play into any of these. It's just like it's literally just like an author or somebody, probably Pablo Hidalgo, working on one of the 1,000 reference books he worked on, just going like, oh, well, he's got to be an age, so he looks about 70 or 80, and that's the age they gave him. Versus new creators coming along just a few years ago, going like, we want to do something with this character, so there's nothing in canon that says he's not this age, so why not? And we've already got like to have like all the human-esque characters just have like, oh, they live about 100 years. Like, that's so boring. Like, let some characters like live a long time and have them be around for a while. And now we can have this really interesting discussion about, okay, well, what is Ki-Adi-Mundi doing here? Why doesn't he know about this? And how is he playing the story? And this familiar character we've seen before is now in this show. What does this mean? Well,
so last week we talked a lot about, perceptions of the Jedi. Are the Jedi good? Are the Jedi bad? What are they? It all depends on, the situation you find yourself in, your point of view, all that stuff. In this, but what we start to learn last week and what we started to learn in Clone Wars is that sometimes, believe it or not, the Jedi are flawed. That's a through line through a lot of Star Wars, and a lot of the characters in the prequels, a lot of the Jedi in the prequels wind up being embodiments of those flaws. And Ki-Adi-Mundi is one of those characters, along with Mace Windu and Yoda. Let's not let Yoda off the hook. These characters are representing the flaws of the Jedi Order. And so in this scene that I think tells us a lot about the flaws of the Jedi Order, of course you would want a character like Ki-Adi-Mundi. It makes sense that he would be part of this. One of the moments in episode 1 that, made me sort of raise an eyebrow was when Vernestra and Saul were talking about the Jedi having political enemies. And then in this episode, their whole reason for not taking this to the High Council is because then they would have to inform the Senate. The implication being that would be bad because their political enemies would use it against them. These characters are not thinking about what's best for the galaxy. They're not thinking about what's best for this situation. They are thinking about what is best for us and our perception in the galaxy, for us to maintain our power and our status quo. Again, it's like, the Mother Anastasia said last week, this is about power and who gets to use it. And the Jedi are doing everything they can in this episode to and the season as a whole to make sure that they're the ones in power and they're the ones that get to use it. Not necessarily for nefarious reasons. They're not Palpatine, they're not Sidious, they're not Plagueis, they're not Kylo Ren and Snoke. They're not any of those characters. But they still want to be the ones in control. They still want to be the ones making the decisions.
It's like what Palpatine says. in Rise of Sith. In the same breath that he's talking about Darth Plagueis, he's talking about, everyone that has power is afraid to lose it, even the Jedi. And he ain't wrong. He's not wrong. The Sith, the Jedi hold a lot of power in this era, and they continue to. And it's all it could all come crumbling down, and it does. And it's because they are holding on to their pearls and clutching onto that power.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Vernestra is a real interesting part of this. Because if you've read The High Republic, I don't think this is where a lot of us would have guessed this character would have wound up. She's this young sort of protege, or young prodigy, excuse me. She's one of the youngest Jedi ever knighted. She has a Padawan when she's like 16. Like this is a character who is supposed to be the shining bright future of the Jedi Order. And she herself is trained. She was the apprentice of a character named Stellan Gios, who was also sort of the bright shining hope for the Jedi. And I won't spoil The High Republic, but things don't go great for Stellan. I'll just throw that out there. Things don't go great for him. And a lot of characters spend a lot of time trying to live up to this ideal version of Stellan that exists in their mind. And Vernestra does that a lot. And I can see Vernestra, as she gets older, as she grows into becoming Rebecca Henderson on this show, thinking like, okay, I cannot be the one who allows this great institution, this great Jedi Order, to fall into disrepute. I can't destroy Stellan's legacy in that way, so I have to do what he would do, which is protect the Jedi Order and its standing in the galaxy at all cost. Don't think that's what Stellan would actually do, but in his absence, I can see characters believing that. And that's why you then have someone who looks to be sort of the bright, hopeful future of the galaxy growing up into becoming the man, in the sense of, you got to stick it to the man and fight the man. And she kind of has wound up, starting off, she may have started off as Qui-Gon-esque, but she's wound up being Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu. And it's an interesting development in that character, and very, and one that I do think resonates, even if it's unpleasant to think about for all the people that read about her as a young sort of renegade, upstart, prodigy Jedi. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about. Actually, let's talk about Soul. Let's sort of stick with this sequence. Vernestra assigns some random Jedi, I can't even remember her name, to be the one to go find Mae, and Soul is the one that sort of steps in and says, no, I got to be the one to do this. I got to go out there and lead this mission, and that's what he does. Ben, what did you think of Soul and his development and growth across this episode?
I'm just wondering if Soul has ever watched a movie, or I guess they would call them holodramas in the Star Wars universe. Because does he not know that when you're going into a dangerous situation where you could possibly die, you do not turn to the character next to you and go something along the lines of, I have something really important to tell you, and I'm gonna wait till after this is over to tell you about it. That is a death sentence for a character. And it pains me to say that, because I love Soul very much, but I'm also extremely worried for his life over the next episode, or however long this drags out. I genuinely, because that's the whole thing. But I did like, stepping back a little bit, like, I do like what he's doing in this episode. I like that he's taken the lead here. And, I will admit the whole, like, the bug scene, kind of like, what was that? What was going on there? I'm very curious. I'm assuming it's setting something up maybe for later, but didn't do a whole lot for this episode, in my opinion.
if Ben, if you turn out to be right and it's setting something up for later, I will rescind this point that I'm about to make. But this was another moment where this episode felt so Favreau-esque that it almost made me wonder if John had written the episode, because there was a creature attack for the sake of a creature attack and nothing else. There's no other point to it. The creature attacks in the movies and in the shows, when done right, are supposed to tell us something about the characters, or give the characters a chance to actually have to work together and overcome some of their differences. It's not just for the sake of going, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had a gross bug attack these characters? Sorry, Ben, continue.
Yeah. No, I agree with what you're saying there. I agree. I genuinely agree. And I don't know what it's doing in this episode. I also just was genuinely disappointed that we spent all this whole show Soul hasn't sparked up his lightsaber yet. It's been really cool to see a Jedi not just not be like Yord every 2 seconds you're sparking up your lightsaber. He's gonna ignite it in a really pivotal moment, and then he sees a giant bug. And
how much better would it have been if the first time he sparked up the lightsaber was when he saw Smiley Teeth Man? That would have actually.
You're so right. You're so right. Actually,
again, I
don't want to agree with you.
I cannot believe I'm about to say it again for the second time. It felt like filler.
There was a thread in there. It took me. I saw it when it happened, and it took me a minute to remember what it was as you were talking. But there actually was something in there for them to pick up on, and that is Osha touches the bug. It wakes up. It dies. Afterwards, she acts like it's her fault that it died, and she's sad. That's the thread.
I'll be honest. I didn't pick up on that.
That was the point of it.
I did pick up on the fact that she's like, oh, I'm starting to sense the Force again.
Yeah. No, she felt remorseful that she had caused the creature to die. And that was something, again, that might just be filler as well.
No,
that might not be.
No, I will say if that is the point of the scene, I think that's valid. That's valid. That's not filler. I will say that. But
yeah,
I will add it could have been done to better. that meaning, Chris. I like that. I feel like there would have been more importance if it was actually Yord being the one that killed that bug, because he's obviously in previous episodes a bit more willing to ignite his saber. But also they're trying to mend this awkwardness that we mentioned before, the awkwardness that him and Osha have, and this tension that they have. And he's, she's kind of being like, help me. And he's like not wanting to. And, I'm concerned for you and all that. And I think that if Yord was the one to kill the bug, it would have been more of a symbol of, you know what, I really am concerned about you, and I will protect you if it needs to happen. I feel like that might have been a bit more of a meaningful moment in that scene.
Yeah, that's a conversation I didn't get was, and so maybe I'm stupid. Maybe someone explain it to me. But Yord, oh, you have a weapon, you can't have blah 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 blah, and they just drop it, and she just keeps it. I'm just like, what was the point? What was that?
You know what? I forgot about that conversation.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
And that was odd. I liked the other conversation that Yord and Osha had, where they talked about, Soul might not be willing to do what needs to be done. You have to step in and do it. I thought that was an interesting, nice moment between the two characters. But just on the, if the death of the giant bug is Mae, not Mae. Oh God, we're gonna keep doing this. Osha reawakening to the Force. I would have liked to have stayed in that moment a little bit longer. Again, this is what this episode sort of lacks the subtlety of these things. It's either there's no subtlety, or it's too subtle that it's there. It's not hitting the right subtlety balance, right? Where the character is allowed to just sort of take a moment and feel something. things just have to keep going, and stuff just gets referred to in really sort of clunky on the nose dialogue.
I mean, it does help set up that great Jecki line, I think, where Jecki is, they're like, oh, you've had more experience with death than I have. And it goes to that. And then, it's her talking about, I can't actually remember the exact line, but it's something along the lines of,
blink
we're not
twice
defined by.
if you're okay, Ben.
If you're being held hostage. No, yeah, it's
Look, I don't have photographic memory. All right. I can't remember everything after one viewing.
It's something to the effect of, we're not defined by our losses. We're defined. It's how we overcome them, I think is the gist of the line, even if I can't remember it exactly, which is, again, it's a great line, great moment. I wish the buildup had been a little bit more nice, as opposed to first draft, because that's a nice line. That's a really good line. I won't I don't want to take anything away from that moment.
For the record, nothing against Jecki, okay? Jecki didn't write the line, okay? She just said it, okay? We love Jecki. One
thing I have noticed about the show, and I have made comment on in my stuff covering it, is it feels like every line is like a really good one-liner and is a really good, quotable line. But maybe that's where, Dom, you mentioned some clunkiness here and there. Maybe that's where that feeling comes from. That every line feels like it's meant to be a really profound thing. And if everything is trying to be really profound, nothing's profound. You know what I mean? So perhaps that's a bit of the effect there.
Yeah, there's definitely some good, that what Jecki tells her, this is, I would include in sort of the, pantheon of great Star Wars wisdom, with do or do not, your focus it determines your reality. The greatest teacher failure is, because it is just life advice. It's just life advice that's said by a Jedi. And so it becomes a Jedi saying. And I won't.
You saw in Big Doo-Doo.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, another fantastic line.
Exactly. Classic.
I won't reiterate my issue with the Rise of Skywalker, but sometimes people try to write great Jedi wisdom and they make it sound like Jedi wisdom, and they include all these Star Wars references, when the best Star Wars wisdom is just wisdom. It doesn't require any. It doesn't require any fantasy dressing up, and that line from Jecki certainly falls into that category. Let's talk about Mae and Qimir, because this is sort of the other sort of dual plot line that's running through this. We'll start more with Mae, because this is the other part of the episode I find completely confounding.
Yeah, me too.
Why? Where? Why?
Look,
how? Does she just
a hike in fresh air can do a lot to your mental state.
Clears her mind, and all of a sudden she's no longer interested in this mission that has consumed her identity for months and years and decades on end. And she's just like, you know what? I'm gonna go turn myself in, with no buildup, no allusion to this, just one little look between the two characters at the end. Chris, I know you have a counterpoint, so take it away.
It's like massive. Did something massive just because she didn't know that. I mean, I know that Osha didn't know that Mae was alive, but Mae didn't know Osha was alive.
No, she didn't know that. Yeah, it's fair.
So she has nothing to live for but revenge, and now she has something else to live for. That is a massive shift in a characterization.
Sure. And it would be great to have had some moments where the character grapples with that instead of having this decision seemingly come out of nowhere.
You're like, look, I get the motivation. I get when she says it, and when you think about it, makes total sense. Because it's illustrated through what Soul was saying earlier, when he's saying, when I spoke your name to her, she lit up. She was like, she reacted to that and she still loves you. There's still good in her. I love that speech from Soul, but you don't get any of that from Mae until it happens. It just comes completely out of nowhere. Just like, it would have been more like things of just like, oh, she spent the entire episode like, been, through hell and back and like had stepped in a mud puddle or something like that. Or maybe she was the one hanging from the tree. She was like, screw this. I don't want to do this anymore. I have a sister and that's where I want to go. It was the abruptness of it. I'm just like, and just like the lack of drama to it. I'm just like, you'd think you'd want to like play with that a little bit as a creator to be like, okay, well, this is interesting. Let's play on this. Let's have her grapple with this instead of just like, okay, left turn. I'm going back to Osha.
The other thing too is I don't know if I said that. I don't think what I said was completely true. I think her motivation isn't fully revenge. I think a lot of it is fear because she said multiple times that she's going to get killed if she doesn't do it. So
sure.
She's also
see
afraid.
It in her face in this scene.
Yeah. So it's not like she already has part of her that doesn't want to do it. She wouldn't need fear as a motivation if that wasn't the case.
And she does spend a lot of this episode like justifying why it's an impossible mission that she's on. Again, I'm not saying this is a bad turn for the character. I'm not saying this is a wrong thing to happen on the show. All I'm saying is that the way it's done in this episode is poor because she spends the whole episode going, how do you kill a Jedi without a weapon? Which, by the way, I thought through the first 2 episodes meant she wasn't allowed to use a weapon to kill a Jedi. I thought it was like kill him with your bare hands kind of thing. Too. And then it's all of a sudden, no, you have to kill the Jedi when they're unarmed, which is, admittedly a more interesting Sith test. Yeah. That's a more interesting Sith test. I just, the way it was said throughout the first 2 episodes that never clicked for me.
I will say an example of great writing and great dialogue is their Qimir and Mae's conversation on when they're walking down the hill of Qimir. Classic Star Wars like camaraderie of you have the guy who maybe he knows more than he's letting on, but he's the skeptic. He's just the wise guy. He's like, so what's the deal with this? Like, what are you doing? You got to kill the Jedi. You can't use a lightsaber. You can't take their lightsaber. He's asking all these questions that I was asking. That I, as a viewer, was just like, thanks. That's why we love Han Solo. He's asking all these like, what is this? What are you doing? Why is this? It's like Miggs Mayfield in the cab of the truck and being like, so you can't take your helmet off, but you can. It's like, what? This doesn't make any sense, man. Like that's the kind of camaraderie, and that's good for the viewer to be like things. But then also, there's other examples.
Yeah. It's, what I'm getting at is I think the character is definitely beginning to question things. I just wish there had been more and that she had built to the decision that her reasoning for wanting to get out of this mission had been built to more rather than seeming to come out of nowhere. As it does in that scene. Go ahead, Hannah.
I think and this is kind of expanding on what we're discussing here. What I'm noticing with the kind of the qualms I'm having with these moments, like what we're discussing here, is that these are things I kind of expect from the back half of the season. And I feel as though the turns or the realizations we're having are just happening too early for me personally, because I feel like we got introduced to everyone in the first 2 episodes. We had a flashback, and I felt like in this episode it should have, and it was half there for me, where it's a lot more, again, just the dynamics, establishing where people's characters are at. They don't believe this, they do believe this, and I do want revenge. I don't like it. Should be establishing where they're still at and their characters, because this is such a new time. These are such new characters. They needed to have more time to establish that. And I feel like this realization to me, if I knew, like, it's hard to say this because I don't know what the next 4 episodes are, but this realization that Mae's having, I would have naturally thought, oh, this is a episode 7 or even 8 kind of realization for me. And it makes me so, in turn, it's actually a good thing in the long run, because I go, what could possibly happen? If these are the things I expected to happen in the end, what could possibly happen for the next 4 episodes? And how is that going to shape up? Because these are all things I thought we would have taken a whole season to achieve. So interesting.
Well, and I think part of the problem is it doesn't build on last week. Like last week, we saw what their dynamic was as kids, and Mae was not about the Jedi. She didn't trust them. She wasn't interested in them. Her wants were always much more aligned with Mother Anastasia and the convent. And so to have her suddenly not go, you know what? I want to see my sister. I want to talk to her. I want to confront her. I want to turn her to my side. I want to hear about what she's been doing. I want to give her a big hug and just have a sisterly reunion. It goes from I'm on this mission to kill Jedi to I'm going to turn myself into the Jedi, which not just doesn't jive with what we saw in the first 2 episodes where she was actively going out of her way to kill Jedi. It doesn't jive with what we saw in the 3rd episode where she was very mistrusting of the Jedi. She wasn't interested in the Jedi. She didn't like the Jedi. Her whole realization about how it's impossible to kill an unarmed person does, lead into some of the stuff we were talking about last week with, what Osha remembers happening likely isn't exactly what happened. Mae probably didn't actually try to kill her, but that the reality of that character still is that she would not be trusting of the Jedi. She would not go to the Jedi in the way that she says, like, I'm just going to turn myself into Kelnaka and hope for the best. I don't think she would do that. That's not what I had gotten from that character across 3.5 episodes. Would you go to her sister? Absolutely. Would you try and separate her sister from the Jedi so they can see each other one-on-one? Certainly. Would she turn herself into Kelnaka? That felt like too much of a leap, too much of a stretch. That's my opinion. Nobody has to agree.
I think that they're presenting, and perhaps I'm conflating a bit because they're twins, but I really do think they're presenting Mae is not a TFG character. Like, she's not a too far gone character. I think she still has good within her. I don't think that her, she's overcome by a lust for revenge, and that is completely, because she's not Darth Maul, and so I think now that I'm remembering all the times that she spoke about what would happen to her if she didn't do this, I feel like she was a vulnerable person who is taken advantage of by this Sith Lord, and he twisted something that happened in her past, and it kind of took one kind of crack he could get into her psyche and expanded it out to use the fact that something happened in her past that could cause her to be mad at Jedi, to then use her for his purposes, which is fighting the Jedi and having somebody, that he can use as a pawn, as an acolyte, as we are led to believe. And so I think that's not her characterization. I think based on, again, the look that she gave her sister when she saw her, based on the way that she talks to Qimir, we can tell that, she's there. She's still there. She's not like Darth Vader burying Anakin deep within himself, unrecognizable. She's still that child is still there. Now, what I think, so I don't think you really need that much of a shift there. I think when she's given another course, she's trying to survive. Both characters are trying to survive. I think when she's given another course, she jumps onto it. I think the reason why she wants to go to the Jedi is not because all of a sudden she's okay with them. It's that she sees that as a least worst less worse option basically than being in a situation where she's under someone's thumb and she's going to definitely get killed if she doesn't do something that she thinks might be impossible. Whereas with the Jedi, now that she knows that her sister is associated with them, because she doesn't know the whole history of so leaving and now being back, she could be none the wiser to that. She, thinks, okay, I have a potential ally, a potential someone who's sympathetic towards me within that group. There's a greater chance that I'll survive in their hands than I will in the hands of this potential Sith Lord. I think that's what's going on there. Now, again, we can always say that should be explained better, and I'll agree with that. If it's not coming across well, it's not coming across well. But for me, that's the way that I read the entire situation. That's the way I'm reading the show. And because I am, everything that's happening and the choices being made makes sense to me. I understand the motivations. I'm not confused about anybody's motivations or why they're saying the words that they're saying.
And I will say really quick, like, despite what I said earlier, like, I like where this episode ends, especially with Mae, because you could easily be like, okay, well, she's going to get there and she's going to kill Naka, and then she's going to face off with the Jedi, and maybe the Sith Lord shows up and they'll team up. Now we've grown to care about Mae, and now we see the fear on her face. We are in fear for her because now everyone there in that forest, their heads on the chopping block. Anybody could die, and including Mae. And that's interesting. That's interesting to me. That's something that I'm going to be on the edge of my seat next week, watching the next episode, wondering who could possibly is going to make it out of this, because, now she's things. I expect she won't, but you don't know. And that's an interesting place to leave the characters, even if I didn't agree with like how it actually went down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm there with you, Ben. Like it is an interesting place to leave the characters. It just felt, again, it felt like a Favreau script where stuff just happens because it has to happen without any build-up, development, character moments, any of the subtlety that goes into, telling a good story.
It's a moment where perhaps, it was almost maybe an expectation that would happen somewhere else, and yet it didn't.
Yeah.
I hate to liken this, just talking about the writing, because we all know I'm a very staunch fan of the Book of Boba Fett for all that it is, the bizarre, interesting, random show that was.
Yeah,
I really love it as a light way, but yeah, if I turn on my, if I had to critique it and analyze it as a body of work, the back half of that season felt super odd in terms of its pacing and plot points. It made this massive, like there was a really big emphasis on the Rancor, and apart from him writing it at the end of the finale, like it felt like something more. Like what's his name, Danny Trejo.
Trejo, yeah.
Trejo. Like he was really sus, but that was never touched on again. And that was like, there was just some interesting parts of dialogue that was shown and never really revisited or circled back to, or never went anywhere. And I do not want to say this for Acolyte now, because I really cannot say definitive statements of anything until I've seen the full show. But it does make me wonder, and it gives me the energy of like, is this really Mae's big turn of a character? Is this really her moment where this is changed? Because it feels weirdly placed to me, unless it has this meaning of why it was here and what happens from here.
The thing that confuses me the most about this is not actually the 3 episodes in the present, but the 1 episode in the past that we had last week. Because one of the moments in that episode that was kind of going against all the other things we're seeing is when she either kills or attempts to kill a creature at the beginning.
Yeah, the butterfly thing, the clear butterflies. Yeah.
Yes. Now, I think this is big because this kind of fits with someone had made this comparison in the chat. That was Zari had mentioned this about the bugs, thinking of bugs as a riff on the Butterlights from episode 3. And it is a juxtaposition because in one situation you have Mae wanting to kill a creature, and then in the other situation you have Osha being sad that a creature has died, to underscore the conversation and argument that they also had. So what we've done is, interestingly enough, we've shown where the characters were as kids. One clearly is showing psychopathic tendencies as a kid, and the other one is not. Now that we've seen in the present time that the one that is empathetic is still empathetic, but we don't know whether or not the psychopathic tendencies still exist in Mae or not. And the big question that I have about Mae's character is if they're doing this whole thing where they're potentially redeeming her and bringing her back to the light, how does that fit with the fact that she was portrayed as a psychopath as a child? Like, how are they going to reconcile that?
And I'll say, not just as a child, in episode 2, right? You know, in episode 1, she kills Indara, and she kills her in a fight. Like, it's for all intents and purposes, it's a fair fight. People, they each have weapons, they each have the Force, they go at it, and she uses Indara's weaknesses, the Jedi weakness, which is their compassion and wanting to help people, like the Grand Inquisitor says in Obi-Wan Kenobi. She uses that against her and wins the fight. In episode 2, the way she kills Torben is fascinating in that she basically convinces him to drink the poison himself. She doesn't like hold him down and pour it down his throat. She leaves it there and says, you do it. And you know why you have to do it. And you know, it really feels through those first 2 episodes that she's motivated by revenge. I don't doubt that Darth Smiley has put all sorts of pressure on her, put her into a situation where she sees no other way out, where maybe this isn't exactly what she wants to be doing. But through episode 1, okay, I can see that just being somebody pressured into doing this because she went in there and she fought Indara like a normal person. Episode 2, you don't get a guy to drink poison unless you really want him dead. And you don't get she is using Torben's own memories and his own guilt over what happened to get him to do that.
The idea that I get is that Torben's the one that really did mess up. We still don't know what happened, which is one of the annoyances that I'm having at the moment. And what I agree with, I think it was Ben who you said we're getting questions faster than we're getting answers, to paraphrase. Like, I that's one of the things where I'm like, okay, I really want an answer to this. I thought we were going to get it in the last episode, and we actually didn't. What I remember seeing when last episode was a bunch of dead bodies, a bunch of dead witches, and my assumption is that Torben had something to do with that. But that's all I can, assume. But I think we're given the idea that perhaps her revenge is actually just for him, and that because the one Jedi did something that actually is deserving of some type of justice to put upon him, and that information's gotten to Darth Smiley. Perhaps Darth Smiley, his twisting is taken revenge that should really be justice, and then he has taken that and extended it out to the entire Jedi Order or the entire group of Jedi that were there. And I think that the show is leading us down the path of not all those Jedi made a full mistake in that situation. Like maybe there was a philosophical mistake of taking children away from their parents. But really, ultimately, it was the choice that the girls were allowed to choose what they were allowed to choose in that situation. So really, the Jedi seemed pretty blameless in that situation, except for potentially Torben. And we're in the future, the other Jedi, especially Sol, are being cast as heroes, I think, by the show's characterizations. So I don't
know. Sol, everything Sol does carries
trying to make up for something.
Yeah, it carries the impression that he's trying to make up for something, and
I
maybe
think
it's
he
maybe
feels-
not stopping
I think he
Torben or
feels-
anything like that. Yeah.
I think he feels responsible for the negative things that happened because of his empathy. I don't think he feels guilty. I don't think it's guilt. I think it's like I was part of this and I want to finish it but it's not like I did something wrong. It's more like I was a part of this happening. It was my intention to cause this to happen, but it did. So it's a little bit different than like doing something that's like clearly twisted to the point that it's tormenting you, where you have to cut yourself off from society and take a vow of silence. I think it's a different level of thing.
His soul sin is him not telling her the full truth, her keeping secrets from her. That's
That's
what
a
we
good
get in
point.
this episode. Him saying,
That's a good
point.
I'm gonna tell you something. It's been eating him up inside, and he's like, I gotta tell you this thing. That's what's guilting him. He didn't really do anything wrong. I don't think he went in there and killed a bunch of witches. I think he went along with, let's cover this up.
Yeah, that makes sense. So anyway, the whole point that I was making there with all of that was that whole concept of how much of it is revenge versus being used and manipulated through fear. And I think that it's majority being used and manipulated through fear. And I think that even though there is evidence there is revenge there in the situation with Torben, I think that's isolated to Torben specifically. I don't think she had an initial lust for revenge for every single Jedi. I would think it was just Torben.
If that's the case, that should have been made clear in the previous
exactly.
episode.
So we all come back to the same point of, even if it does make sense in the end after we talk about it, why do we have to talk about it? Why can't we just intuitively know
if we were doing this like we did the Hannah, I'll let you in just a second. Don't worry.
That's okay. You go.
If we were doing this the way we did the Ahsoka reviews, where it was like we for some reason we had to be off for these 8 weeks, and then we came back and started reviewing them in chunks.
Yeah.
We might have come away from that. We might be looking at it a little bit differently, but seeing as this is the amount of the story that we have, and this is how the story is being experienced, I think it's fair to reflect and critique this method of storytelling and the way it's all playing out, even if it ultimately
this
makes
show.
Sense. Ben, let Hannah talk. Damn it!
It'll play completely different on the binge. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, it will. It will. Okay, here's a theory, and I got to explain it out so it makes sense. So bear with me. It's not a theory; it's just more of a concept. What if the first episode of this show was actually episode 3? That the first thing we see is this flashback, is this with the witch coven. We have these 2 children. They have some power. One gets really mad and does a horrible thing. One wants to be a Jedi, but then the Jedi come in. Something suspicious happens. The facts aren't lining up. There's witches dead. The Jedi are weird about it. Something's gone down. That's the start of the mystery there. And then we go into episodes 1 and 2, which would be then 2 and 3. And then we expand from there, because then we jump into, that must be Mae going after that's Indara. She's killed Indara right now. We go immediately understanding that Mae has followed that line of anger and revenge, and she's gone, she's killed Indara, she kills Torben. Oh my gosh, is she just going to kill them all? Is this all the show? And then we get the other side of Mae. Mae has been a Jedi, but she's not anymore. Why is that? Mae is in the light side, but she doesn't know what's happening and who she is. And the Jedi are different at this point. But we see all the faces that we saw in the flashback, which would have been the first episode. And you would have started the show on the same point, and then like the twins, this dual storyline of this anger, revenge, and light side identity, and traveled that forward into whatever the show is. And I think that might have been an interesting point for, at this point, episode 4 being episode 4, to see them come together and have this switch up now. Like this is where they're coming ahead of we were sisters. That was our connection. That was a big point of us. But we're being faced with, we can be in each other's lives now. I wonder if, like, there's a few kind of beats in there that wouldn't have worked with that flashback being the first episode. But honestly, overall, I think as a concept, that would have made more sense to me.
And that perhaps was, I mean, that perhaps was the concept. Like perhaps like if you're writing a story, if you're doing like a story treatment, you're probably not going to have the story treatment out of order. You're probably going to explain everything that happens in order. Like the story starts with two girls that their mothers are witches, and one of them wants to be a Jedi and one of them wants to be a witch, and then the Jedi come, and then that's probably how Leslie Headland is pitching that story to Kathleen Kennedy. And then at some point you get to that point in the story where you're writing it out and you're realizing, okay, so the story is really going to pick up in the current present time by one twin being misidentified for another twin because they think that the other one's dead. What if the audience also is as confused as the characters?
Yeah.
That would be an interesting experience. Then they're kind of it's an immersive experience. And I think that was the concept that they threw in. And that happens a lot in storytelling, to immerse the audience with the characters and hide something from them. And so, but the question then is posited by that. If you're doing those tricks to try to make it a thriller to the audience, are you then undercutting the emotional progression of the characters and how you understand it? Maybe.
Glass Onion.
Yes,
Knives Out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't know what the hell's going on. That could be perceived as frustrating for most of the movie because you're like, I don't understand anyone here. But then by the end of the movie, you're like, because he still holds that against her after 20 years, and you get it. By the end, you get it all, and that's kind of that big satisfaction you get at the end. You go, that's the mystery. I didn't at all get it, but now I do. I want this to have that energy.
Imagine if Glass Onion and Knives Out were Netflix series and you had to watch those stories cut up, a few scenes at a time. That would be us.
This maybe raises the question of, should Star Wars, now that Star Wars is going back to being movies, is that where these stories should go back to being told?
Story like that, most likely.
Yeah,
a story like that might be better.
I will say to your point, Hannah, about like starting the story, at the beginning instead of doing sort of a flashback. There's a story about the making of Finding Nemo that originally, like the first version of the movie that they showed to test audiences, the opening scene where Nemo's mother and entire family except his father are all killed, like was revealed later in the movie, and that explains why his dad is so adamant about finding him, so desperate to find him. But it didn't work with test audiences, and so they moved it up to the front and started it there, so then you understand Nemo's dad through the entire movie.
God, that's such a good point.
Yeah, and I will say I can't claim that point for my own. I read that in a review of the Acolyte episode 3 by
first
Josh.
person to relate the two things.
By Josh Spiegel over at Episodic Medium. I thought it was a really good, a really interesting point, and it builds into exactly what you're saying, Hannah. That maybe episode 3 should have been episode 1, much in the same way that the Phantom Menace starts 10 years before Attack of the Clones. It would fit in with that Star Wars storytelling.
And I think one thing we always have to consider is the corporate appeal of this show and the general appeal of this show. And because the only point I have against, story-wise, it makes sense if that flashback was the first episode. The only thing I have against it is that might be a little too deep and dark for general audiences to have as a first impression. Whereas the episodes, the premiere, it's like, these are the Jedi characters. Okay, I'll go with them. They're the goodies, and let's see what they do. Like, it's a lot more. What's the word? It was just easier to consume, I think, for a general audience, which has been a focus.
I mean, that was done. Sorry, Dominic. We just went through this with the Avatar live action version, where there was a very traumatizing event that was revealed much later in the show and the animated version, and they started off in the first episode with that, and the reaction by a lot of people was, where is the fun show that we watched as kids? They just started with the big, most traumatizing moment of the entire universe in the first episode. What the heck?
So maybe there's another another route for this, right? Because for the Avatar show, maybe it's harder to get into because it's all right at the beginning. Maybe this would have been harder to get into because it's right at the beginning, much in the same way that, audiences in 99, there were a lot of them that didn't resonate with Phantom Menace at the time, much as we love it and much as it has grown to become a loved movie. Again, those sort of good faith arguments about it is just, well, how do I reconcile Darth Vader as a 10-year-old kid, and how do I then reconcile that with skipping the next 10 years of his life to when he's a 20-year-old doofus? So maybe there's a version of this where we don't have episode 3 as episode 3. This was episode 3. Next week was episode 4. And we build through the season, just going in order until we reach a point later in the season where the mystery of what has been driving all of these characters for so long, what has become so overwhelming that we have to stop the narrative around episode 6, maybe, and go back and have a flashback. And much as I enjoyed and really did like the way that episode played with perspective and only showed us really what Osha saw and how Osha perceived it, much as I think that was an interesting sort of cinematic storytelling technique, maybe the better version of that is to just wait until a later point in the season, have built up the mystery in the present, quote unquote, as much as possible, and then show us the definitive version of what happened, so that when we come back for the 2-part finale, we're like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to get so much so soon as well. One of my first thoughts that I had after watching the 3rd episode was, I can't believe that we got an entire episode with almost all the backstory in it. Because what I was expecting to see, especially after some of the feedback from the Book of Boba Fett that you mentioned earlier, Hannah, as a series, is I was expecting to see that just put piece by piece into different episodes. So I was expecting to see the flashbacks as just maybe 10, 20-minute sequences in several episodes, rather than an entire episode that was an entire flashback. I thought that was what I was expecting to see. And I was expecting to see that start after we had fully established what was going on in the present. And I didn't think we had fully established the mystery of the present yet, because you still had all that stuff going on with Darth Smiley. And I thought that was kind of where the story was driving. So it did throw me off a little bit. I still loved what they did with the flashback. It's still what I would have wanted to see. But yeah, the order of where it was in the show was unexpected. And I don't know if I would have gone there as, thinking if you were asking me what's the best way to do this, I wouldn't have said do the first 2 episodes and then go back and show almost the entire past in a full episode after that, and then just come right back to the present. I don't know if I'd do it that way if someone asked me their opinion on how that should be done.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of bringing it back to this episode, I was shocked that we got this episode when we did. When we saw that first trailer of, lightsaber whizzing through the forest and then Jedi getting thrown back by this force tidal wave thing, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's the end of the show. That's probably the last 30 minutes of the last episode. To me, that's what I read as. The fact that we're getting this is like the mid-season finale. This is back when, ultimately this is something huge happening in the middle of the show, which I really like, but it's very unexpected.
I have to say that I have a theory about this show in this situation that we're talking about now, with stuff in the trailer happening sooner than we expected. I think it supports my theory. And my theory is that we don't know what the show is yet. That we're still getting into this. And this potentially is a story, I believe, that we've heard is plotted out for multiple seasons. We haven't officially had a green lighting for season 2, I don't think yet.
Not yet. No,
not yet. But I believe that there is a plan for a story that overarches at least 1 or 2 more seasons and beyond this one. And so I think that, they're introducing characters. I think, an interesting thing that was mentioned earlier was we were talking about how, a lot of these characters are going to die clearly, because if they know about this, it's going to, mess with the canon, and them apparently not knowing anything about this 100 years later. So if all the characters that we're seeing are going to die, then they might not potentially be the core characters of this era. And so there might be a lot of more core characters that are going to yet to be introduced that they're saving for us that, aren't even in the trailers. And that's my theory. And the reason why it's my theory is because I think that while a lot of time has been spent on Mae's not like the character that exemplifies the Sith world that I was expecting to see in a show that I thought potentially would be all about Sith. So I think that the character that we showing up, Darth Smiley, I don't think he's the master. I don't think he's. I think there's somebody pulling strings for him. I think we're seeing him now because he's not the ultimate thing. He's going to lead back to something else that presumably is Plagueis. And I think that the next 4 episodes, we're going to get more of that, or potentially the next season 2 and 3, we're going to get more of that. And that's why things are moving so fast now, because they have to get this out of the way so that they can really get to the meat and potatoes of what the show is, which I think is Plagueis and
that's
his training as Sith.
That's a very House of the Dragon sort of approach to it, where the first season they burn through 20 years of storytelling in 5 episodes.
Exactly.
So that you can get to season 2, which is on now, and episode 1. Excellent. Like
Ahsoka.
Yes.
Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Marek, Thrawn.
Yeah. But it's all about like now once you get into season 2, then it's like now the story is really beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. We'll see. Again, we'll have to see how it all plays out. I'll take this opportunity to throw in the theory that I like, which is that Mae isn't the acolyte of the title. That over the course of this season, the truth of what went down that night will come out, and it will be so devastating that Osha turns on the Jedi and becomes the acolyte of the title.
Yeah.
I like that one a lot. I'm on board for that. I think that would be real interesting. But we'll have to see. We haven't really talked about Qimir yet. We've kind of danced around this character. I will again say my opinion by couching it. You're gonna do what's the thing? What's the management technique? The criticism sandwich. I'm gonna say
yeah.
I'm gonna say lots of good things, so it makes what I actually think of this episode seem less harsh. I loved Qimir in episode 1 or episode 2. I thought he was really funny, really engaging, really charming, really great presence on screen, very charismatic. Manny Jacinto is a tremendous actor. He's one of my favorite actors. I maintain that his performance as Jason Mendoza on The Good Place is one of the all-time great sitcom performances. And I love him bringing sort of sitcom energy to a bad guy in Star Wars. He annoyed the living daylights out of me in this episode. I was so ready for him to get off the screen. He was so annoying. I don't know why. I don't know why it was different than the other one, but I found him just so terribly like nails on a chalkboard. I hope he isn't Darth Smiley now, so that Darth Smiley can kill him. Not actually. I do think there's lots of potential for this character, but that's sort of like I was real sick of him by the end of this episode. Ben, I feel like I hurt you by saying that. What do you think?
I don't know what to say. I am shocked and appalled, sir. No, I mean, I thought he was great. My only comment is just like, he can't be, here's what I'm calling him, because I've heard other people say this and I really like it. Smilo Ren is the name that I'm calling him. I really, as much as I enjoy his performance, I like the little bits of menacing that he brings to the performance. There's this one moment in episode 2 where Osha shows up dressed like Mae, and he's like thinking he's like, you look just like her. And it's just like this chilling, like, oh my, this guy, there's more to this guy. It's like, clearly there's more to this guy. And I would love to see him just unleash that and just like be that person. I think that's great. Obviously it's interesting to like have perhaps the Dark Lord of the Sith himself just like, traveling around as this like hobo guide guy who's kind of drunk and whatever else. I like that idea, but also they're telegraphing it really, really hard here, and with this episode especially. And I'm almost like, are we supposed to believe it's him? I know we're supposed to believe it's him, but are they telegraphing this too much? Or is this like a double thing where they're like, oh, we'll make him think so hard that it's him that it's actually not him, but it actually is him. I don't know what I'm saying here. I'm not sure if I believe that's him or not, because they're trying so hard to make us believe that it's him.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting tactic, and you see it in mystery, what if kind of shows and movies and stories of like the red herring, but he's too much of a red herring, but then he might be a double red herring to himself. Like that's a classic to make it more complex mystery. And it is actually kind of working, if I may, because I'm like, it does feel a little too obvious that he is the guy, but then I think he is. I think he is Smiley McGee or whatever we're calling him. I think he's got the same head shape, but I'm in the camp that it's Mother Coral is Smiley.
Have we seen the entire announced cast for this show now?
I believe we have. Yeah, I believe so.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still my still preferred theory is that Manny is not playing Smilo Ren or Smiley McGee or any whatever we want to call that guy. Is that he is the actual Sith Master, be it Darth Plagueis or Darth Plagueis' predecessor. I like that theory almost more than him being the guy behind the mask for right now. But boy, it
Wait, you're saying he could be Plagueis?
Yeah.
That's,
we don't know.
Honestly,
Canon,
what?
Yeah. Canon, like as we were talking about with Kiadi Mundi, Legends canon does not apply. And what we saw in what we read about in the Lucino book does not need to be what is the actual truth. As great a story as that was.
Okay.
To have again the scene where he knowingly lets himself be on the verge of being captured by 4 Jedi in episode 2 is the most Sheev Palpatine stunt I have ever seen. And I could absolutely believe that guy taught Palpatine everything he knew. And he is definitely holding back on what he knows. And it's already clear that he knows a lot. So am I saying he's Plagueis? No, I don't think that's likely. Is he Plagueis' master? Is he
Tenebrious?
Is he a Sith, 3 down? Yeah, is he 3 down the line from Plagueis because he's the master, and then Mae or Osha or somebody else is going to be his apprentice, and then Mae, let's go with Mae just because she's the evil one for right now. Mae then trains Plagueis. Like, maybe we're a couple Sith down the line, but I like the idea that he's the master more than that he's Darth Smiley.
I mean, I don't think Plagueis has to be a Ma'an.
Moon.
I don't.
He's Kiadi Mundi.
That wasn't Mundi. That was Plagueis the whole time. No. Yeah, I don't think he has to be because it's really just that one book and then maybe a little bit in comics here and there. I want to say that is the source for that. I don't think it's too deep or too ingrained in Star Wars. I don't think. And so I would not be mad if they had an amazing story and they, needed somebody whose face is easier to make facial expressions than whatever Muns are.
Yeah.
I think. What, Ben? You go.
No, please.
Both of you are afraid to say what you're going to say next.
Yeah. I just like. Jeez, man! I don't even have a succinct response for this theory.
Look,
I don't even have.
I remember what I was gonna.
Yeah.
Look, all I'm gonna say is we talked about this on the Discord the other night, and someone that the subject of Plagueis came up, and someone, I forget who, maybe it was Joel, who said, "Oh, what if he is Plagueis and we meet him? He's asleep." And that's how Plagueis dies.
Wait, what?
Huh? What?
Plagueis.
We see
Plagueis
in that final scene of the book where he's dead.
Okay, let me spell it. Plagueis is killed in his sleep, and we meet this guy when he's sleeping.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the first time we see Qimir, the first time we see Manny is he's asleep.
And there is that whole thing about, killing a Jedi who is unarmed. What about killing a Sith who's unarmed? That's the story of Palpatine and Plagueis. If you are to believe what Palpatine said. Now, of course, this is Star Wars. People lie. That whole thing could have been made up. We take that as a canon. George Lucas probably meant it as canon because James Luceno was allowed to go then and tell that story.
I was at Celebration 5 in 2010, and George on stage said, Plagueis was Palpatine's master. He told that to Jon Stewart and me and 2,000 other people.
Yeah, but again, what does that even mean is in Disney canon that George Lucas said something was canon? Because George Lucas also said that the microbiotic world of the Force was the future of the Star Wars franchise. And that did not happen. Yes. But again, I still would like that story to be true. I think it adds a lot of characterization to Palpatine that's really interesting. And I think it has more meaning if it's true versus if it's a fable that he's just made up to manipulate Anakin into doing something. But again, I think, the Luceno part and the source book part that Joel mentioned in the chat that Mun ethnicity is from, you don't need that. You don't necessarily need that.
Mm-hmm.
I think my thought to this all that I would add is just in the crazy world where Qimir is Plagueis, he has nothing apart from like being like, oh, he's sneaky or he might be able to do something like this. The story of Palpatine, let alone Plagueis, is not a one of this like hopeful redemption, this to and fro. Do I be naughty? Do I be good? It's evil. He's a pure representation of evil and greed and everything negative of nature, of a spirit.
And I think Qimir is that.
He's presenting chill. He's presenting to chill. And I know Plagueis was like, what was his Damask? Like he presented differently. Like that was his thing.
And Palpatine presented chill. Palpatine was just kind of nice old man who's going to help the Naboo people and watch this little kid's career with great interest and greedy squabbling delegates. I'm going to get rid of them all.
But like Qimir, he's still too bumbling. He's too.
It's like Ted Bundy. It's like the most psychopathic people are the most, able to blend in, and it all could be an act. It all could be an act. That makes it that shows the genius of Plagueis. If that is Plagueis, that says that Plagueis is even more genius than you think because he's even fooled you. You can't even believe that he's that guy.
My brain hurts.
Yeah, I think.
I don't believe this is a thing. By the way,
let me say, I don't think Qimir is Plagueis. I think he might be the master. I don't think he's Plagueis.
No,
but
I
could go along with it if that's where it winds up. I could 100% go along with it. But I like the idea of him being the master. maybe he's just some crazy dude. That's cool too. You know,
If
but
the drunk is the one that is this epically powerful being that trains
Was
Plagueis,
he
but trains Palpatine to
But was
rule the
he?
Okay,
world to
wait. Has
create
anyone
Exegol.
actually asked George Lucas point blank? Better yet, has a child asked George Lucas point blank, was Jar Jar the original Plagueis, and did you change it because of fans?
I heard a story about someone asking George Lucas about Darth Jar Jar at like a social event, and George apparently gave them the dirtiest look, like that basically said, "You fucking nerd, get out of my face with that stupid question. That's obviously not true." So, Jar Jar is not the Sith Lord. Jar Jar is a well-meaning fool, who is bumbles his way into being manipulated. But the idea that the Sith Lord could blend in. The Sith are in hiding, but they're hiding in plain sight. They aren't on Exegol. Their plan isn't to build 10,000 Star Destroyers yet. They haven't gone to the unknown regions. They aren't on Peridia. They are within the galaxy, and they're people that you wouldn't look at and go, "Oh yeah, Sith Lord." The same way you wouldn't look at Palpatine and go, "Oh yeah, that dude's a Sith Lord," or Dooku, "That dude's a Sith Lord." Maul, you'd probably go, "That dude's a Sith Lord," so maybe not the most perfect choice. But the idea that to blend in and to allow himself to get into places he might otherwise not be able to get into, the Sith Lord takes on the persona of just kind of a bumbling doofus. Is an interesting one to me. I like it. And then we'll have a scene of him in his lair acting the way you expect the Sith Lord to act, with the Force lightning and the my evil plans.
You know what's interesting too is this reminds me of Rings of Power. And
yes. Okay. Yeah. Joel brings this up. This is interesting.
Yes. And I don't know.
And I can talk about this because I've watched this now.
Yes, this is exactly what I'm talking about,
okay.
Joel. That the Sauron thing is like, potentially the character that may or may not be Sauron. I don't know if they've confirmed or denied. I don't pay as much attention to that. But basically, there was this character that was a bit of a bubbling idiot and it could barely even speak. And then the theory was, oh, this is Sauron. And so I wonder if, there's a few things that could be happening here. This could be Plagueis, but even the character himself doesn't know that he's Plagueis. In kind of a similar way to something that happens in the Genshin Impact storyline, for example. Or he could be Plagueis to be. This character's turned into Plagueis by an insane traumatic thing that happens, or somebody coming in, Pegasus' Master Tenebris coming in and manipulating and turning him into this evil character that he's not yet become. Like there's so many things that be going on other than just him pulling a Palpatine or a Damask.
Hannah, what did you think of the Rings of Power twist? I don't know what it is. I made it through 2.5 episodes.
Oh, really? Oh, you don't want to? Are you gonna finish it? Are you gonna?
Even if I do, go ahead and spoil it. I don't care.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, random side note, but yes, I was very surprised. I had no idea it was the character that it ended up being, and I was really shocked at the end of the Sauron reveal of who it was. Very, very shocked. But made sense because he was weird, but not in a stupid way. He was weird because he just had that energy. He had that energy of something. There's something in the past. There's something in the past. Boom, there's the reveal. And that's, I think, what I would expect. I think that's what I mean by it's like he's literally just too silly for me. Like Qimir in this show, is too silly for me. It would be too silly if he is the Plagueis or the big bad or the Plagueis master. What are we going for here? Because, yeah. So segueing back to Rings of Power, because I think the Sauron reveal made sense to me. That worked for me. If that answers your question, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I Qimir hasn't ventured into the too silly for me, but again,
Again, my overarching opinion of the whole thing, I think all this is incredibly entertaining. I think ultimately the thing has the same credence as the Jar Jar theory. I think that I don't know why people are even talking about this. This character is clearly written to be a foil for Mae, just so she has someone to talk to. That is the only. It does not go any further than that.
Do you buy into that? It's like he's like a red herring, perhaps. Like it's, or do you think Leslie Headland and the writers are sitting around going, wait, they think this guy's the Sith?
Yeah.
They think this guy's in the helmet. What
They're
is
not even
wrong with
trying.
people?
They're not even trying. Yeah, no, because they would try. If they were trying to do a red herring, there would be red herring stuff in there. They would be trying to lay some false breadcrumbs, and they're not. This is just completely fabricated because people have a week between episodes of talk. Like this would not come up if you just watched the whole show straight or only had 5 minutes to think about it between episodes.
I think he's Darth Smiley. That's I think the reveal. But that's what
it'll be. If that happens, I'm just gonna I'm gonna come on the show and I'm just like, okay, wow.
We'll trade seats.
Nice job.
Guess what? $5.
Nice job.
Get you $5. We won't even figure out who Darth Smiley is before the end of the season, and we're all gonna all our brains are just gonna melt by the season finale.
Yeah,
I think he'll take the mask off by the end of the season. That's my prediction.
Damask.
You'll take the mask off.
like Hugo Damask.
All right.
Come here. Here go Damask.
All right. There you go. We're
Crikey, Ben. Crikey. That was terrible. That was so forced.
I know.
So
that's not how the Force works.
You mock me. You mock me.
So we're starting
nice
to we're reaching the point where we're running out of time on the episode. So let's hit some soupies, then we'll do score out of 10. And Ben, I will allow you a week's respite from the corner, and we'll do a double-sized connection corner.
That'll take up half
next
the
week.
show.
I know, right? But let's hit some soupies first. Joel throws in, how would we feel if Qimir was Darth Plagueis? So we just talked about that.
Horrible.
Just talked about it. Love it.
Horrible.
Totally on board. Do you think Acolyte could get greenlit for season 2? Oh, well, yes. I do think there will definitely be a season 2 of the show.
There has to be.
Beyond that is maybe a little bit more of a question. It may get the Andor 2 and done.
I believe it got really good numbers. And you know what's interesting is even though a lot of people are saying that they don't particularly like the show, what I'm not hearing is I'm not watching it. So there's gonna be another season.
Yeah, everyone that is hating on the show you see online, their complaints are up to date. Their complaints are about the newest episode, which means they're watching it.
Yeah,
and that's all that matters.
Exactly.
They get
next up from Will of the Force, I think Mae's switch up isn't far-fetched. If I mourned the loss of a loved one for over a decade and then found out they were actually alive, my morals would probably be all mixed up too.
Yeah, that was my opinion on it.
Presented.
Yeah,
I guess so. I think I just want a more build up.
Yeah, I see the critique too.
I buy the logic. The logic I get is just the execution. That's my only complaint.
Yeah. Next, I agree on that. I agree exactly what Ben said. We got one from Joseph Cooper who says, this is why I prefer weekly releases. There can be good discussions like this. Mystery shows are all about trying to solve the mysteries. Yeah, I want either movies that are 2.5 hours long, or week-to-week releases like this. I think honestly, Andor and the Clone Wars struck found the right approach for Star Wars with doing story arcs rather than one drawn out story across the season, which this show is doing, which Obi-Wan Kenobi did. And then like Mando does like individual episodes that kind of together form a larger thing. And really, I think the balance of the arcs that Andor and Clone Wars did, I think work the best, because you get a movie-sized storyline that is split in more or less natural places. Andor had a few odd episode ending beats, but but most of the time, going here's act 1 of the movie, here's act 2 of the movie, and here's act 3 of the movie across 3 weeks, to me generally worked. So that's my feeling on it.
Yeah.
And Joel drops in another one. Thoughts on Qimir is Smilo Ren, but the helmet is controlling him via Sith spirit, or the Sith Master is controlling
I
him.
can kind of see that.
It's an evil
I
helmet.
believe that more than he's any relation to Plagueis. I believe that more.
Yeah. No, I could see him being used as like a vessel, like because he is so like airheady.
This is some Darth Momin stuff. We're gonna go into the
on
comics.
Twitter. Someone on Twitter was talking about how, and I wish I could credit them because it was a great point of like the way he moves his hand up and he like flicks Osha to the side is very puppet-like, and like
And he does
like
he descends into the scene in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
For all of the Doctor Who fans, you sort of expect a giant version of Neil Patrick Harris behind him, controlling him like the toy maker.
Exactly.
See, okay, this is actually not a bad theory, because like that would tie into kind of the establishment of what Plagueis is. And I think, Plagueis' whole kind of evil side of him is he's obviously scientifically trying to like explore cloning and becoming more than himself and force particles and da da da. It's like that could have been a part of his testing. Like, could he use his force powers to like enter and control someone's mind? In freaking, I can't believe I'm referencing this, Lego Star Wars, if you need to like ride a bantha, or you like got Kenobi in that Clone Wars episode where he takes the mind control of an animal to like, and even in Attack of the Clones, like that, but with another person, and they're like, so Plagueis is like using the force to become in someone else's like spirit and control them. I would believe that more than Qimir has anything physically to do that he is Plagueis or like the master of Plagueis.
I love how against this theory you are, Hannah. Like this is
I'm so against it.
I haven't seen you this fired up about anything since Andor. This is great.
So true.
Amazing. So that was sort of a informal version of Ask the SWU. We have many comments from the Discord that we will get to as the weeks go on. Maybe we'll have to do like a full bonus Acolyte Ask the SWU before the finale. Maybe we could do like a 2-week show, a two show week or something. I don't know. We'll see how we get to. But Vlad, Martin, Matt, Giltzer, Ingenious, Kajira, Blackthorn, Wolf Dog. We will get to your questions eventually. Don't you worry. And with that, let's go around the table one last time, give some final thoughts and scores out of 10 for Day. Hannah, why don't you start us off this time? Final thoughts and score out of 10 for this one.
I have had an interesting experience this episode where the discussion has led me to be a bit more critical of my opening thoughts and critical of the episode, which is usually the opposite for me, where I look at the episode in more light. But I mean, we didn't really touch on the kind of insanity at the end of whoa. As much as all the criticisms we had for the most part of this episode, the last 5 minutes were absolutely sensational.
It was sick.
They were epic. Great tension. I finally noticed the music in this show. Really enjoyed the music and the end and creating that. Oh my god! In creating that moment. The reveal of Kelnaka being dead. Again, just all that intensity. Epic, shocking. I really love that last 5 minutes. Again, some pacing things and a few of the dialogue stuff that I totally agree isn't hitting for me. And a few, parts I was explaining how I didn't feel it was enough lead up to some of the big moments that I felt like it had to be more. I should have felt more emotionally about. So I'm going to give this a round. It's an upward looking 6.5 for me.
An upward looking 6.5. I like it.
Yeah.
Ben, final thoughts and score out of 10 for Day.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot I loved about this episode. There's a lot of complaining in this episode, but like, there's a lot of great moments, and one that we really didn't get to talk about a whole lot, but I think it goes without saying, like, it's an incredible moment. I think we'll have a lot more to say next week when we see that scene like play out officially. But the final scene is incredible. Like the music, him floating down, him or her again. I'm not gonna gender anybody. Yeah, we don't know. The jury's still out on that character. Could be Coral. But like that character coming down through the jungle and just that whole thing's like something genuinely like stuff that I look forward to so much when there's new Star Wars, of being like, that's something I've never seen before. It's something that's completely different. I've never seen this dark side user float down and then face a character, then flick them to the side and then blow away a bunch of Jedi. And like the whole idea of like a Sith Lord, perhaps at their full power, just facing off against Jedi without any fear. We've never really seen that before outside of that one scene in Revenge of the Sith where Palpatine's like, yeah, I'm going to kill all of you in a second. And, it was kind of weird. But yeah, all that's to say is I enjoyed this episode. I had a lot of issues with it. It's kind of a slump towards the middle of the season. I'm expecting next week's episode to be much better. At least I hope it will. I'm gonna give this one a 7.
7 out of 10 from Ben. So an upward 6.5 from Hannah, a 7 from Ben. Chris, what are your final thoughts and score out of 10 on episode 4?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons why there's that continued sentiment of, oh, I actually like this episode more than it sounded like I like this episode, is because we usually do structure these conversations around the characters, because it's an easy way to structure the conversations. And that was this episode's weakest part. The characters were not characterized super well in this episode. There wasn't much development going on. Some of the dialogue didn't quite, make sense, and so that was the point that was what was missing from the episode. It had everything else. It had the tension. It had a little bit of nice action, not a lot, but what we did get was interesting. The way the episode was shot was still great, and the music was great. So there was lots of amazing elements to this episode, things we take for granted a lot in Star Wars. It just kind of stood out for the fact that the characterization was weaker than we're used to so far for the show and some of the more recent shows that have come out. But one thing that really stood out to me big time while watching this episode is usually when I'm watching Star Wars on Disney Plus, I feel like it is a modern update to the original trilogy. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like the original trilogy, they're trying to make the original trilogy, but they're shooting it with better equipment, better effects, etc. And there's some modern innovations in the filming styles here and there, and different directors and cinematographers with different styles. But in general, I feel that it's branching off from the original trilogy. This show, and especially this episode, felt to me like someone was trying to make more of the Phantom Menace, which is a rare thing and a really cool thing. Down to the music, I felt like the references in the music really referenced a lot of the style that John Williams had in the Phantom Menace, more than any other film. And I felt like the pacing was more similar to the Phantom Menace. The conversations, the dialogue was more similar to the Phantom Menace, sometimes to its detriment. I think some of the things that are issues in the Phantom Menace were also issues with this episode. But in the end, I think that it was very much an homage and a continuation of the Phantom Menace, which makes sense because that's the closest thing in Star Wars canon chronologically to this. So for that, I really appreciated the episode. So for me, this was a 9 out of 10. I take a point off for the characterization. I still really enjoyed this episode, and I thought it was great. I just, again, it was a little slow for me, and part of that was that the slow moments weren't filled with good character moments like they should have been.
9 out of 10 from Chris. I'm gonna give this a.
I'm scared.
5.
Yeah, I'm scared. Oh yeah, I was gonna guess
5.
you were gonna say 5.
Yeah, I'll give it a 5. Like I said,
That sounds about right.
Definitely not great, but not terrible either. Somewhere in the middle. Some really great moments in here. The Kelnaka reveal was terrific. I loved it. I thought that was fantastic. As you all have said, the final moments were tremendous. That was really, really cool, really, really interesting, and a great cliffhanger. But a cliffhanger that fell flat because the rest of the episode did not work for me. It just didn't work. I like some of the ideas. I like some of the concepts that they're playing with, but they were not executed up to my expectations for Star Wars or my expectations for anything really. I don't think they were executed well. I thought the dialogue was clunky and awkward and felt like a first draft when really it needed some polishing and some more work, which is a shame. But even through that, shining through that were some bright lights, like the Jackie line. We're not defined by what we lose, we're defined by what we survive. And of course, my dear new favorite character, Basil, who was a light in the darkness guiding me through this episode and into next week. So I look forward to continuing this discussion, continuing with this show. I still think there's great potential here. I just was really, I came away from this episode being let down because the first three were so good, and this just felt like such a weird step in the wrong direction in terms of quality rather than story. So 5 out of 10 from me. And with that, we will begin to wrap things up for this week.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Please follow us on social media at the SWU for updates throughout the week. And of course, we'll be back with another show, same time, same place next week. If you want to watch live, that place is on YouTube and some of our other social media we stream on as well, Facebook and X and Twitch. And that time is Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. But we appreciate everybody tuning in later who can't make it live. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Dominic, thank you so much for hosting.
It was my pleasure, as always. I'm not here next week, but I'll find some way of getting some thoughts in on the Acolyte because I hate to miss it, but I will unfortunately be away, which is a real shame. But
punk.
Yeah. It's chasing me away from the episode. This has been great fun. I look forward to continuing the discussion in the weeks to come, be that 7 days time, 14 days time, or whenever I'm next back on the show. But great fun. And Qimir is Plagueis. I'm dying on that hill now. Good night.
Woo! Oh my god. Basil is Plagueis. Solved.
I am ready to join the dark side.
I will fight you, Dom.
Oh my god. At Dominic J25. That is the @ where Dom can be at Ted. Ted, thank you so much for hosting as well.
Oh, it was a play. I
was like, which one? Who?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I heard Hannah or Ben.
I always do it in this order.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Is that
I was just assuming it was me, so I was just gonna go with it. Okay, two big things.
It's like we've never done a show before.
Yeah, you'd think.
Oh man.
Look at this baby.
Hey, there you go.
Getting there.
Got some structure here.
3 more pieces this week. Awesome.
I got through like 3 bags during this discussion, man. It was. Sure. I did some work.
You said that last week.
We got some roofing on this thing, so.
That's true. You got the struts out. That's good.
Yeah. Also, you may have found yourself asking the question, hey, where's that IPC podcast? You guys haven't done an episode in like 2 or 3 months, I think.
Yes.
And I have finally some answers. This is my first time announcing this anywhere. We are officially returning this Monday and Tuesday for a 2-night 10th anniversary event where you'll be tuning in. We'll have audience feedback. We'll have all kinds of stuff. We have a big show planned. We've been gone for a while, okay? I'm sorry, guys. Life happens, but we're bringing the show back in a big way. I hope you guys tune in.
Amazing.
I like that it's 2 days. I like that it's over 2 days. I'm fascinated to see why. But it's exciting.
Yeah, it's too much for one night. It's just too much.
I love that.
A little mini series there. At Ben Hart with no E, I'm sure is where you can get more information about that. And at IPC Podcast.
Yeah.
I got it.
Nailed it.
I'm like, where do I stop it? Do I stop it at the sea? Do I stop it at the pod? Or do I go all the way to the cast? Yes, it's the whole thing. We need more shows so I can make a habit of saying that enough times to remember and be confident of how to say that. Which, after 2 shows, that's a great start. Hannah, thank you so much for hosting as well.
A bloody good time as always, boyos. Another spicy one, and I swear, Qimir is Plagueis. I don't know what I'll do. I'll probably do something dramatic. I'll paint my face to be something else. I don't know. Something drastic and ridiculous.
You'll paint your face to be Legends Plagueis as a protest.
Yes, I'll just shift my Monday costume to be a Plagueis costume. That's it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that kind of fits. I mean, it's the the.
It really does. It's like shocking. Yeah.
It's just paint it great, easy, very very easy.
But thank you. Thank you for being here.
You can see everything Hannah's up to over at the Raeside on social media and the Raeside YouTube channel. For those listening, that's RAE side, and check it out. Make sure you check out all the other shows on the network as well, in addition to the Raeside, like Iron Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. And make sure you check out the SWU network Discord for all the fun that we have throughout the week over there. And make sure on your way out of here that you subscribe, whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Definitely subscribe. Thanks to all our super chatters. Thanks to our channel members. We are out of here. We'll be back next week for Dom and Hannah and Ben. My name is Chris, and may the Force be with you.
It's a wrap.